Hey everybody, Mr. Vanderzee here, and we're going to be finishing up the Federalism notes. Just recording this for you because I have a sub today and I want you to finish these notes up. You might hear my son in the background playing a game a little bit, so I'm homesick with him today. Sorry about that. So anyway, federalism. We last time talked about definition of federalism. That's very important. That it's a government system in which important powers are shared by national and local governments. So we have our national government, and then we have state, city, county governments, etc. It's in the Constitution where we find these, and the first kind are federal powers, powers that the federal government has that states might not. Sometimes they do have some of these, but there are three kinds. There's expressed powers, which are written in the Constitution directly. There's implied powers, which are based on expressed powers, things that we deem necessary and proper in order to carry out the expressed powers. And then lastly, there are inherent powers, things that the government should be able to do just because it is a government. And that's where we left off last time. So now we have state powers, and I'm just going to breeze through this fairly quickly, so sorry. But reserved powers are another name for them because they are powers that are reserved for the states. The 10th Amendment tells us that it includes any powers not delegated to the national government, reserved for the people, or denied to the states by the Constitution. They include public schools. Yep, states run public schools in every state. Number 2, establish local government. Number 3, licensing for certain professions. So maybe some of your parents have to be licensed for their job. I have to have a teacher's license. Lawyers, contractors, what else? Nurses, doctors, even cosmetologists, right? They all have to be licensed for their profession, and the state does that. So if you move states, you probably have to apply for a new license for a lot of those professions. Number 4 is protect public health, welfare, and morals. And number 5 is regulate intrastate commerce, so commerce within a state, rather, for number 5. Remember, the federal government does commerce between states. And then number 6, election administration. Each state does their own method of election. Some do electronic, some do, multiple choice, like with a pencil, and there's all kinds of ways that states do voting. All right, then we have number 3, shared powers. So these are powers that are shared between the state and federal government. Also called concurrent powers. They can be exercised by both national governments and states. They include levying taxes. Number 2, borrowing money. Number 3, money for the general welfare. Number 4, eminent domain. You can maybe write this down here, but eminent domain is the process by which the government can force someone to sell their land for public good. Now that might seem unfair, but if the government wanted to build a highway, there could be potentially one person who decides, no, I'm not moving. We need to put a highway somewhere. Well, I'm not moving, right? And the government can, in essence, force that person, say, I'm sorry, we need this land. But my grandfather built this house with his own hands. No, it doesn't matter, right? You need to move, and the government will compensate you, hopefully fairly. So yeah, that's eminent domain. They can take land for the common good, but they have to pay you for it. Number 5, enact and enforce laws. And number 6, establish courts and define crimes. So yeah, we have different crimes for each state, but then we also have federal crimes, and same with courts. Number 4 are called denied powers, and they are powers that are prohibited, that the government can't do. No level of government can do certain things. The federal can't tax exports. They can't interfere with state responsibilities. Number 2, the state can't form treaties or alliances with a foreign government. They can't coin their own money, so we couldn't do, the Michigan buck here. We have to stick to the U.S. dollar, and can't grant titles of nobility. And that's coming from their history, again, of fearing this system of, an oligarchy in essence, right, where there's these nobles who are better than everyone else. The founding fathers, that is. Number 3, both state and federal can't do all these things that are found in the Bill of Rights. So the right to bear arms, the right to free speech, freedom of religion, all those things, right? Those are our civil rights. Number 5, 4 other key points on federalism. So those are all the powers. Just to review, we had federal powers, state powers, then shared powers, things that both of them can do. Then we have denied powers, things that none of them can do. Now, a couple other key points. The Supremacy Clause is an important one. Article 6, Section 2, the Constitution and the laws of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. So, in other words, the Constitution is the highest law in the land. The federal government always wins when there is a conflict between federal and state. Number 2, no state or local government act or law may conflict with national laws of the Constitution. So that's an important part of that. Number 3, examples, civil rights violations. So there were states that didn't want to desegregate their schools. We were saying you have to protect civil rights. You have to, there's no more, minorities in the back of the bus sort of thing. And yet states were not following through on that. And so there was conflict, and the federal government had to kind of crack down on these southern states. Abortion ban in Texas, they couldn't really get away with that because abortion is legal at the federal level. And then McCullough versus Maryland, which is the case we talked about down here. I don't have it here, but you remember that one. Who gets to call the fouls? The Supreme Court. They are the referees here, or the umpires, or whatever, calling the balls and strikes, whatever sports analogy you want to use there. But they make the call. Letter B, obligations of the federal government to the states. The federal government must guarantee each state a Republican form of government, and that's just, representative form. Example, during the ratification of the 14th Amendment, stubborn southern states had representatives removed. So, yeah. Number 2, must protect them against invasion and domestic violence. So that's an obligation the government has to the states. So examples, World War II, Little Rock, Detroit riots of 1967 after MLK was assassinated. So there's been a lot of times the government has had to get involved. September 11, and get involved for the protection of the people, the federal government. Not just say, the states will handle it, but no, the federal government should act when people are in danger. Number 4, the federal government must respect the territorial integrity of each state. Example, they must need they must need state approval for territorial changes. So if we want to change the border, that has to be something the federal government and Michigan would agree to. Now, there was a loophole in 1863 with West Virginia, but we won't get into that. So, yeah. Letter C, obligations of states to the nation now. Elections of all national government officials and the drawing of congressional districts. That's something the states have to do. We owe it to the federal government to follow that system. Number 2, we have to participate in the amendment process. We have to vote yes or no. If there's an amendment, it goes to state legislatures, and we would have to approve that. And I think 2/3 of the states have to approve that. So, yeah. Letter D, the Supreme Court is the umpire. Once again, the weakness of federalism is conflict over power. Due to the fact that federalism divides power, conflicts frequently do arise between national and state governments, and the federal courts have to umpire all that. And at the top of the federal courts, we have the Supreme Court. So, federalism, system that works fairly well, shared powers, division of power, and but there will be conflicts, and so the courts have to kind of make the calls on that, and hopefully they are sticking to the Constitution in all of that, because that's where we have the blueprint for federalism. All right, that's it for this one, everybody. Enjoy the rest of class, and just email me if you have any questions. All right, bye.